I'm Mark Evans. I was 36 at the time. No outstanding features. Average height, slightly athletic build, regular job as a manager at a pharmaceutical company in Boston. Could I have imagined that some boring office guy would soon turn into an obsessive vigilante? Of course not. Jenny and I met in New York at the wedding of mutual friends. I went there on the groom's side, and she turned out to be an old friend of the bride. A crowded ceremony in the spirit of the American dream, a white arch of fresh flowers, a buffet with gourmet snacks, a photo zone with hanging lanterns, and a bunch of ribbons. People who were complete strangers mingled around the long tables, and the euphoria of the holiday was in the air. I always felt awkward at big celebrations. It was as if I was in a mode. Drink a couple of glasses and pretend that everything is fine, although inside I was bored. At some point, I decided to clear my head and went out onto the back veranda of the old mansion where the wedding was taking place. There, at the railing, stood a woman in an elegant blue dress. Tall, fit, with light brown hair and such an aloof look, as if she had ended up here by mistake. I noticed that she was smoking, although no one around seemed to be doing so. She shook the ashes into a tiny glass jar, as if she was afraid of ruining the beauty of the mansion. From afar, I would give her about 30 years old. Then it turned out 32. The woman looked both fragile and strong at the same time. Maybe it was her posture or the way she lifted her chin slightly to avoid making eye contact with random people. I approached and politely asked if she minded being next door. She just silently shook her head and smiled at the corners of her lips. A little later, I found out that her name is Jennifer. That's how we met. I stupidly said that I hate big weddings. She laughed and said that she, too, feels awkward in the company of fake guests whom she sees for the first time, and they pretend that they are all best friends. Wow, I said, how people love to start extra pathos. Yeah, I would prefer a quiet ceremony with loved ones, she responded and put out her cigarette. But they think that if there is a wedding, it must be luxurious. Look, they've been saving for years. Something in her voice caught my attention, at the same time fatigue and some kind of sadness hiding between the lines, as if she knew what it was like to save up for a wedding, but never have one. We started talking. Jenny said that she lives nearby in New Jersey and works as an interior designer, or rather, she would like to work in her specialty, but for now she works part-time wherever she can. Listening to her, I understood that she was smart, but far from happy. In the evening, when everyone returned to the hall and the dancing began, she and I got lost among the guests. I thought that was it. A short moment of communication had passed, and everyone would go their own way. But around 10 in the evening, when the host announced another toast, we ran into each other at the drinks counter. They looked at each other and smiled, like two accomplices trying to withstand this booth. I have an idea, she suddenly said. Do you want to run away? Right now? I was surprised. Why not? No one here will care about our disappearance. Everyone is too busy pretending to be having the best day ever. She was right. The drunken guests were already buried in their glasses or dancing with a forgotten sense of rhythm, and the bride and groom were probably absorbed in each other. We quietly slipped out the side door and hailed a taxi right outside the entrance. The taxi rushed us through the night city, covered with garlands of lights. That night we talked about everything, about our favorite films and books, about past disappointments, about failures that taught us how to live. It seemed like we had known each other for 100 years. Somewhere in the morning, we found ourselves on the Hudson Embankment. In fact, this was our first together evening. No promises, no big words. Just two people who desperately wanted to feel less alone. I didn't ask why she didn't get married sooner. She herself did not specify whether I had a serious relationship. There was still that unfamiliar taste of freedom and something forbidden in the air, as if we had escaped not from the wedding of friends, but from our own fears. Later, she admitted that she had not felt such easy communication with a man for a long time without unnecessary questions and self-confident courtship. Like, most of the guys either immediately climbed into bed with her or tried to play the role of savior, which is even worse. Let me note right away, It wasn't just love at first sight. Rather, we both belonged to those adults who had already stumbled over the rake of life, and we wanted to forget about the pain of the past, at least for a while. None of us made Napoleonic plans then. We just felt something running between us that could grow into more if we let it. The day after the wedding, we exchanged numbers. Then a series of calls and short messages began. I lived in Boston, she lived in New Jersey. The distance was noticeable, but not catastrophic. I kept thinking that this won't last long, that maybe our connection would disintegrate on its own. But a couple of weeks passed, and we did not stop communicating. When Jenny finally agreed to come visit me for the weekend, I rented her a cozy hotel room. Not far from my house, she was somewhat wary. We spent a wonderful evening at an Italian restaurant. She joked around and seemed relaxed until we got to dessert. Then she suddenly became serious and said, "Listen, Mark, we communicate so well and I like it, but I need to clear something up before we go too far. I have a son." Then I was literally dumbfounded for a second, because during our conversations, and we communicated mostly in general terms, family, life, she did not mention that she was already a mother. Maybe she was afraid, or maybe she didn't see the point. But I didn't experience shock or disgust, rather a slight thrill. "Wow," I breathed. "How old is he?" "7. No, already 8, turned last month. His name is Logan, his father. He disappeared when he found out that I was pregnant. I raised Logan myself. My parents have been dead for a long time, so I had to rely only on myself." She paused and glanced at me. "You may not believe it, but I didn't tell you right away, not because I wanted to hide it. I just didn't know at the beginning of our acquaintance whether it was worth burdening you with all these details." There was a challenge in her voice. "This is it, my confession. Now decide whether you will run away or accept the situation." And if I doubted for even a moment whether I needed this, everything dissipated when I looked into her eyes. They contained both pain and hope. A woman who went through betrayal. I was aware that I was entering new territory. Being with a person who already has a child is not easy. But something inside me said, yes, it won't be easy, but why not try? "Jenny," I began, "I'm not a teenager who is scared by the very word child. I'm 36, I'm enough," I grinned, "mature to understand that each of us has our own past. I understand that this is a responsibility, but I do not see anything unacceptable in this. If we feel good together, I'm not afraid that you have a son." She breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed to me as if a heavy weight had been lifted from her shoulders. A smile appeared on my lips, and I even noticed tears on my eyelashes. That evening, we made love for the first time in her hotel room. It wasn't sex on the extreme, everything turned out tender, a little excited, almost shy. It's as if we were two lonely people who dreamed of warmth and suddenly found it in each other. The next day, Jenny went back to New Jersey, but the phone and instant messages continued to simmer between us. We wrote long messages, sent each other photos, cute voices, silly stickers, everything that teenagers usually do when they fall in love. Adults over 30, after all, also have the right to passion. Several months passed of such visits to each other on weekends. Sometimes I would fly into Newark and rent a car to drive to Jenny's. Sometimes she herself came to me by bus. We saw each other, went to restaurants, parks. Sometimes we just lay in bed the whole weekend, especially if she managed to leave Logan for the weekend with a friend. Gradually, I realized that I wanted to see her around more often. Remote relationships are like a fire. It lasts, but you constantly need to add more wood. Honestly, for the first time, I felt like I was ready for something more than just dating. Never before had I had serious thoughts about family, some fleeting connections, civil marriages, but everything ended either in mutual separation or my departure. With Jenny, it was different. When I looked at her, I saw not only a partner, but also a woman who was raising a child and who had already experienced great turmoil. She had fewer illusions than my exes, and it was attractive. The first time I met Logan was under rather strange circumstances. Jenny came down with a fever, and at that moment there was no one at home who could help. I left work and went to see her. I had to take a day off and saw along the highway for several hours. When I arrived, a boy opened the door for me thin, wearing pajamas with Avengers badges. He was clearly surprised that an unfamiliar man was standing on the threshold, but he quickly moved away when he saw my bag of medicine and food. "Hi," I said, trying to smile and look friendly. Mark, Mom's friend." "Ah." He squinted. "Mom is sick. Are you a doctor?" "Not really," I answered. "I just want to help. We have broth and antipyretics." I entered their modest home. A small living room, simple furniture, an old TV, and Logan's toys in the corner. Jenny was lying on the sofa, covered with a blanket. When she saw me, she put on a semblance of a smile and whispered that she did not expect such heroism. I waved it off, saying, "What nonsense." That evening I made her soup, wrapped her in a blanket, checked her temperature, and then entertained Logan so that he would not make noise or run around. We had a toy dinosaur battle, and he giggled as I made thunderous roars to imitate a T-Rex. And then, in the intervals between these childhood joys, I caught myself thinking, but I like this. I don't feel burdened, even when I have to clean up scattered toys and wash dishes. Jenny recovered within a couple of days, and I spent all these days with her, helping around the house. Logan, although he looked at me with curiosity, no longer shied away. There seemed to be some basis of trust between us. Even though we had only known each other for a few months, I invited Jenny to move in with me in Boston. I understood that this was a radical decision, but she was struggling with rent payments, and she didn't have a stable job in New Jersey, and in Boston I could help her get a job at a design firm. I had some connections in the city. She doubted. "What about Logan? He will have to change school, environment," she said. "But I am assured that there are good primary classes in Boston, and I can help." I was even ready to help her rent a separate apartment as long as she was nearby, so that we could build a normal relationship and not go back and forth. In a word, I tried to overcome her fears. In the end, she agreed. "Okay, we'll try," Jenny said, "but if something goes wrong, we'll go back to New Jersey." I nodded. If only I knew how symbolically this phrase about return sounded like a premonition that she would always have a way back, but for me there would be no forward. We didn't sign right away. I arranged the rental housing for myself, and Jenny and Logan moved into a spacious apartment with me in Cambridge, not far from the center of Boston. It was a temporary solution, but a joint one. The first couple of months seemed fabulous. Jenny was hired as an assistant at a small design bureau. Logan went to a local school. I was fiddling with documents in order to arrange insurance for her and the boy if something happened. In the evenings, we watched movies with the whole family, and looking at them, I caught myself thinking that, for the first time in my life, I was feeling the taste of real family comfort. I won't say that everything was smooth. We sometimes quarreled. Sometimes Jenny would tense up because she felt like she was sitting on my neck. I assured her that this was temporary until she got back on her feet. Logan had a hard time adjusting to the new place at times, but we managed and were even glad that we had become closer. And then the moment came when I decided to legalize our relationship. I took Jenny out for a romantic dinner, and right in the middle of a cozy Italian restaurant, I pulled out a box with a ring. This was not a Hollywood script. I didn't take a knee. I didn't order violinists. He just quietly told her, "Jenny, I want us to be a family. The real one. And so that Logan knows that he has a father, even if not biological, but in spirit." Her eyes moistened. She squeezed my hand and nodded. "Yes, Mark, I'll marry you." Then it seemed to me that I was the happiest person on earth. My best friend Harry, when he found out how quickly we decided to get married, twirled his finger at his temple. "Are you out of your mind? You know each other nothing at all." But I didn't care about other people's opinions. I thought I had finally found the woman I wanted to grow old with. We got married without much fanfare. We only invited relatives and a couple of friends. A small ceremony at a country club near Boston on the grass by the pond. The photographer didn't bother us with staged shots, and instead of a noisy feast, we made a buffet with quiet music and a children's corner for Logan, and his new friends from school. I remember how Jenny looked in a white lace dress with her hair down over her shoulders. Her smile shone so much that it eclipsed the June sun. Logan, in a small three-piece suit, walked between the tables, telling everyone that he now had a real dad. And when he called me Dad for the first time, my throat constricted from a wave of feelings. The wedding night, of course, also remained a bright spot in my memory. There was so much tenderness and passion in Jenny's embrace, a mixture of gratitude, euphoria, and, perhaps, fear of something new. We were drunk not so much from the wine as from the realization that we had become a family. Soon after the wedding, we purchased a small house near Boston with a mortgage, a bright two-story cottage with a neat lawn and a maple tree at the entrance. Everything seemed to be going according to plan. Logan was going to school. I had a stable management position at a pharmaceutical company. Jenny was continuing her career as a designer, gaining her own clients. It would seem like a dream. We drink morning coffee on the veranda, discuss how to spend the weekend, make plans, maybe a summer vacation somewhere in Maine or Cape Cod. Our neighbors are typical American families who wave friendly when they meet and invite us to a barbecue. Everything looked perfect. About a year after the wedding, Logan turned 9, I began to notice that something was happening with Jenny. She began to disappear more often in the evenings, citing work reasons. She said that she had urgent projects, and she needed to meet with clients sometimes until late in the evening. I'm not the kind of person who immediately panics or throws accusations. Moreover, I also have work, stress, and reports. But sometimes I approached her and asked, "Honey, maybe you need something. Maybe you're tired. Let's take a vacation." To which she usually shrugged it off. "It's okay, Mark. There's just a lot to do. You know how difficult it is to build a career in a new place." Outwardly, peace and harmony still reigned among us. We ate dinner together from time to time when her urgent projects weren't in the way, and still made love on the weekends when we could put Logan to bed early or send him to a friend's for a slumber party. But I increasingly noticed that during intimacy she seemed to be distracted or immersed in herself. I tried to cheer her up, ask what was wrong, but she just smiled and said that she had work deadlines on her mind. One evening, while sorting things out in the living room, I came across her purse. Out came a receipt from a bar in downtown Boston for the previous night. The time is about 11 in the evening. The amount is quite decent. But she said that she was at the client's house, discussing the interior of the children's room. It is doubtful that they discussed this at the bar. I didn't attach too much importance to it at the time. In the depths of my soul, of course, there was a pang. But I pushed this feeling deeper. I felt like something was seeping into our relationship. We still looked like an ideal couple to everyone, and we believed it ourselves. But mistrust is an insidious thing. It can undermine the foundation for years until everything collapses in one moment. Several weeks have passed since I discovered the strange receipt from the bar. During this time, Jenny continued to behave as usual, or at least tried to give that impression. But I began to feel that something had changed in her attitude towards me. She became more nervous, sometimes getting irritated over trifles. If earlier she enthusiastically talked about how her day went, now she limited herself to the phrases, "everything is fine," or "tired." One evening we were sitting in the living room. Logan had already gone to bed. I tried to watch TV, some kind of crime drama. Jenny sat next to her, but limply scrolled through the feed on her phone and sighed incessantly. I asked if she had a headache and received a short, "Yes, a little." "Would you like me to bring you a pill?" I suggested. She looked at me with a kind of distant look. "No need, I can handle it myself. Just tired." It seemed like nothing special, but a cold prick seemed to pierce me. Too often she began to get tired. I tried to be sensitive and patient. At the same time, my determination not to brush aside my worries was already strengthening. I decided to at least carefully understand the situation. No scandals. I think somewhere deep down I was hoping that it would all turn out to be a false alarm, that maybe she really was feeling overwhelmed at work or emotionally burnt out. But the feeling of jealousy is a strong thing. Since I worked in an office, and Jenny often left for meetings with clients. I decided to check whether these meetings really exist or whether it's all a fiction. I made a list of her proposed projects that she mentioned. I wrote to her a couple of times, "Hello, where are you now? Everything is fine," and watched what she would answer. Sometimes she would say that she was on site in the suburbs, but that same evening I didn't find any sketches or notes in her bag that designers usually carry around with them. One day she said that she would be with the customer until 11 in the evening. I couldn't stand it, and after my work I went to that same suburb. I called her, she didn't pick up, then she wrote a message. "We'll talk later, I'm busy." Somehow, using a Google map and the address that she supposedly gave earlier, I drove along the desired street. There were mostly cottages there. I didn't notice any obvious facility under construction. No one likes Jenny. I made a circle, stood by the side of the road for about 15 minutes silence. The house, where, as she said, the new interior project was located, was dark, with closed shutters. There were no cars at the entrance, no signs of life. As a result, I turned around and went home, without waiting for at least some hint of my wife's presence. My pulse was pounding in my ears with adrenaline and anger. When she returned, I pretended to be already asleep. I wanted to ask 100 questions, but I was afraid that I would scream, and by screaming, I would only provoke her into lying or aggression. At the same time, the thought sounded louder and louder in my head. She's lying. It's not with the client. Then where was she and with whom? Finally, the idea that Jenny was cheating on me went from a hunch to a conscious paranoia. But I lacked direct evidence. Just because a person lied about a work project is not absolute proof of adultery, right? Maybe she just didn't want to admit that she goes to the bar alone to take her mind off her problems. Or does she have financial debts that she's hiding? I tried to find alternative explanations, but the longer I searched, the more clearly I felt that it was about another man. And yet fate itself handed me an unwanted surprise. One day, when Jenny took a shower after returning home, her phone was left on the kitchen table. The device vibrated with an incoming message. I usually didn't pry into her personal gadgets. We trusted each other, or so I thought. But then something inside me seemed to explode. This is a chance. Open it and look. I fought with myself, as if I was doing something dirty and base. But the suspicions were stronger. I clicked to read the notice. It turned out to be a message from a certain P, with, "Short, I can't stop thinking about last night. When will we see you again?" My heart felt like it sank to my feet. Last night, she said that she returned from work only at midnight. Horrible images immediately flashed in my head. I opened the chat. Yes, I violated her personal boundaries, and then I didn't care anymore. There was a whole fragment of correspondence, but she seemed to have managed to delete most of the messages. Just in the last couple of days, there have been several hints from this PS. They say, "I'm not going on a business trip next week, you can come to me." And she answered, "I don't know yet whether it will work." I felt dizzy. Everything fell into place. That late bar receipt, fake meetings with clients, constant excuses about being tired. Does she really have another man? And not just one affair, but full-fledged dates? I was shaking. I heard the water turn off in the bathroom, and in a panic, I slammed the phone screen shut and put the device back in place. I immediately felt disgusted, both for spying and for learning the truth. Is there anything more painful than finding out this? It seemed as if a volcano of rage and resentment was growing inside me. A couple of minutes later, Jenny came out in a robe, drying her hair with a towel. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, clutching the edge of the table. I wanted to immediately throw everything in my face. Who is PS? What the hell, Jenny? But I restrained myself. I understood that if I made a scene at that very moment, she would start lying and withdraw. I was not prepared for the barrage of her possible excuses or accusations against me. However, apparently my face showed that something was wrong with me. Jenny frowned. "Everything is fine." "Okay," I muttered, looking away. "Just a headache. Maybe you can take some painkillers?" "Yes, I'll accept," I said, trying to stay calm. That night we slept in the same bed. but I couldn't even think about touching her. Every minute seemed like torture because I felt her warmth next to me and understood that she was giving this warmth to someone else. I lay with my eyes open, looking at the ceiling, and imagined her meeting her lover, clinging to him, perhaps telling him that she was tired of me. Anger and jealousy were eating me up from the inside. The next day I got up early and, trying not to make any noise, went outside for a walk. Everything had to be thought through. I wanted to destroy and break, but I understood that blind rage would not lead to anything good. I am a person who is used to acting wisely and step by step. As a manager, I know how to plan and anticipate risks. And now this part of me has turned on fully. I decided to gather evidence before openly making accusations. Too much was at stake. Our common home, credit, reputation, the life of Logan, who considered me his dad. If I break down in a head-on conflict, Jenny can take the boy to God knows where, file for divorce, make me out to be an abuser. I was not prepared for such a scenario. I understood. We need irrefutable evidence, correspondence, photographs, times and places of meetings, perhaps even testimony of witnesses. I felt like the hero of a cheap detective story, but I didn't see any other way out. I used to consider spying and reading messages on phones to be something unworthy. Now it became a way for me to save my pride and, oddly enough, Logan's future. I was afraid that she wanted to drag her son into the circle of regular male comings and goings and break his psyche. After all, Logan is attached to me. How will he survive if everything falls apart? Another thought was already brewing inside me. She must pay for what she did to me. I loved this woman, took care of her child, and furnished our home. And now it seemed to me that she was simply laughing in the face of my feelings, running to someone else. For what? Maybe he is richer, more impressive, or younger. Or does she just have a constant thirst for adrenaline? The answer did not change the fact of betrayal. To say that I wanted to kill or injure her, no, there were no such thoughts. But cold anger awoke in me. I wanted her to feel the pain not physically, but emotionally. Which one exactly? At first I didn't know, but I was sure that I couldn't just let it go with impunity. To get my thoughts in order a little, I called my best friend Harry. We've been friends since college. He is a successful lawyer, also lives in Boston, is not married, but dates different women. I knew that he was a pragmatic person and could help with advice. We met at a bar in his neighborhood. I, which is rare, ordered strong whiskey. Harry, noticing my tense face, asked, "Problems? At work? In the family? Tell me." "Family." I answered and outlined the situation in a few phrases. "I know it sounds like nonsense, but it seems to me that Jenny is cheating on me. And I'm almost 100% sure." He sighed. "Damn, buddy, don't you just want to talk to her directly? It's too early. I want to collect evidence. If it comes to divorce, I want to be in a strong position." "Fine. As a lawyer, I will say, in our state, treason is not always a decisive factor, but if you have irrefutable evidence, you can claim more favorable conditions in court, especially if the interests of the child are affected. Besides, you could undermine her reputation. Although these are already dirty games, Mark. Are you ready?" "Don't know. I'm furious. But I can't just leave everything like that." Harry promised that if necessary, he would put me in touch with a private detective. Like, nowadays it's easier than it seems. Of course, the pleasure is not cheap, but perhaps it will solve the problem with evidence. I hesitated. Hiring a detective and spying on his wife seemed wild, but at the same time, I didn't see any other way. By the way, during a conversation with Harry, I uttered the word revenge for the first time. Not directly, but rather in a hint. She must be held accountable for what she does to my heart and our family. Harry replied that he understood my feelings, but advised me not to make rash decisions. "If you are planning something illegal, you better forget it. Even though you suffer, don't go to jail. It's not worth it." I assured that I was not planning any crime. Then I myself didn't really understand where my thirst for retribution would lead. A few days after talking with Harry, I gathered my courage and did something I didn't expect. I installed a little spyware on Jenny's phone. Yes, it sounds creepy. This is a criminal invasion of privacy. But I already felt that I had no other choice if I wanted to get to the bottom of the truth. Moreover, I did it quietly, under the pretext of updating some settings on her gadget. Jenny was busy in the kitchen at that moment and just nodded. A couple of days later, the program began sending me screenshots of her incoming messages, and here I experienced a real shock. It turned out that with this Patrick Sterling, her former client, or not even an ex, with whom she allegedly collaborated to create the office design. But in fact, their correspondence was far from working terms. The text messages were frank. I've read him describe how he wants to pin her up against the wall, and she tells him that it's driving her crazy, and she couldn't get enough of what they did that night. It was as if my brain refused to believe that all this was being written by my wife, the same one who a couple of years ago said that I was the best thing that happened to her in her entire life. A feeling of disgust and pain filled me. My heart was pounding and my mouth felt bitter. Soon there were messages about next Tuesday and booking a hotel room on the highway. This is direct evidence of treason, not only emotionally, but also physically. Not only does she not need me, she is looking for passion and gets it from someone else. And she does it brazenly, knowing that she has a husband and son at home. Around this time, Jenny suddenly began to act more kindly towards me. It was as if I felt that I was guessing something. Several evenings in a row, she came home early, brought wine and a plate of cheese, and tried to be playful. Once she suggested taking a bath together by candlelight. I understood that perhaps she wanted to distract me or ease her conscience. We plunged into the water with fragrant foam in the light of soft candlesticks. She pressed her back against me and ran her hand over my chest. She said that she had long wanted to relax like this together. I tried to tune in to an intimate mood, but my recent correspondence was spinning in my head. I saw her words to another man before my eyes. When she turned to face me and found my lips, I felt a stabbing sensation, both desire and disgust. The body reacted to her touch, and the mind screamed, "Are you crazy? She's a cheater." But I let her continue by some twisted logic. I wanted to feel her passion. Maybe he hoped that deep down she was still mine. Or maybe he just wanted to prove to himself that I could be no worse than that Patrick. But inside me, everything was false. I imagined that she might have done the same thing to him just a few days ago. When we finished our classes, I felt not pleasure, but bitterness and some kind of gloomy determination. Yes, I thought, I will take away from her everything that she so carelessly throws at the feet of her lover. After the shocking discovery of texting and late-night meetings, my life went downhill. On the outside, it might seem that everything was as before, but inside I was seething with rage and resentment, mixed with a bitter feeling of humiliation. Every time Jenny and I were alone, her text messages to her lover popped up in my head. She seemed to feel that something was wrong, but she herself was too busy with her secret game. Logan, of course, didn't suspect anything. He was a happy, cheerful boy who believed, I am his real father, and Mom and Dad are the best family. Sometimes it seemed to me that I was living in a nightmare. How did I even allow the situation to come to this? The boy is attached to me, and I am ready to destroy his entire idea of a normal life. Finally, one evening I could not restrain myself and had a small outburst of anger. Jenny returned home around 10, again saying that she worked for a capricious client. I sat in the living room in the dark, deliberately turning off the lights to let her sense that something was wrong. When she came in, I said in a sharp tone, "Aren't you tired of lying?" "What?" She stared at me in confusion, not understanding what I was talking about. "What's the matter, Mark?" I jumped up from my chair and, overcoming the desire to lay out all my cards at once, asked, "Why do you always come late? You do understand that this is not normal for a family woman, right?" I, I have work," she stammered. I explained. "Enough," I interrupted. "Are you saying that you never lied about meetings with clients?" Jenny fidgeted like someone pinned against a wall. But then she quickly pulled herself together and answered almost calmly, "I really have a lot of projects. Sometimes I meet clients in bars and restaurants. It happens. And anyway, are you interrogating me? What scenes of jealousy?" Her confident tone drove me crazy, but I still did not dare to reveal that I had read her correspondence. I understood she would most likely lie again, and I was not yet ready for an open scandal that would destroy our house. At the same time, I wanted to make her feel like the ground was slipping away from under her feet. "Okay," I said, having difficulty controlling the trembling in my voice. "Just know that I'm not a fool. If you continue to behave this way, the consequences will be serious. Are you threatening me?" She straightened up, and something like fear flashed in her eyes. "I say that there is a limit to everything," I said coldly, "and this limit is close. That's where we parted ways." She quickly changed her clothes and went to bed. I stayed on the couch, listening to my own racing heartbeat. The next day I called Harry, a lawyer friend, and told him I wanted to play big. I asked him for the contacts of a trusted private detective so that he could help collect photo and video evidence of treason. Without further questioning, Harry gave me the number of a certain Walter, a former cop from Boston who was now doing private detective work. Walter turned out to be a middle-aged, strong man with short gray hair and a basics who has seen a lot of all sorts of rubbish. We met at his office in a discreet business center on the outskirts. I explained the situation briefly, trying to appear calm and decisive. "My wife may be cheating on me. I have indirect evidence correspondence, fake, meetings with clients, late returns home. I need to record her meetings with her lover in order to have a serious argument in case of divorce." Walter nodded and asked a few business questions. "Do I need photographs, videos, information about the identity of my lover?" I said that yes, I need everything. He requested an advance for a week of observation. The amount was considerable, but I nodded without hesitation. I have put off taking decisive steps for too long. It may cost a lot, but I will finally push her to the wall. For the next couple of days, I felt like a conspirator. I corresponded with Walter all the time, sending him possible schedules of Jenny's movements, addresses where she usually went. He himself tried not to show it. On the contrary, he behaved with his wife as a more caring husband, so that she would not be wary. Jenny, however, was already balancing between fear and self-confidence. Perhaps she thought that I was just jealous and would limit myself to verbal complaints, but she still didn't know how it would turn out. I won't go into technical details. The detective did a classic job of surveillance. Miniature GPS trackers, one for Jenny's car, one for her bag, as well as a camera with a long lens to photograph her and her lover from afar. I continued to use the spy program on her phone and shared the information I received with Walter. Result, it didn't keep me waiting. 4 days later, Walter reported that Jenny and a certain middle-aged man had parked at a motel in the very suburb where I had once searched in vain for her client. Walter took several series of photographs of them entering the room, spending about 2 hours there, and then leaving together, laughing and hugging. The photographs were clear enough to identify faces. In the evening, when I opened the email with these pictures, my chest literally sank. I saw my wife tenderly kissing someone else before entering the car. One part of me wanted to scream in horror, the other part went cold, becoming cold-blooded. Now I had no doubt. She and Patrick were not just flirting, they were dating regularly. And I found out his official information. Patrick Sterling, 41 years old, owner of a small law office, married, by the way. So, it's interesting. My wife's married lover. Another detail that adds spice to the betrayal. Several more days passed, during which I continued to collect information. Walter even found out the address where Patrick lives with his wife and, it seems, their child. It was the height of cynicism. He has his own family, Jenny has a husband and child, and they arrange secret dates in cheap motels. I was seething inside, reading his frivolous messages to her in the morning. But one evening something happened that I wasn't quite prepared for. I ran into Patrick in person. This happened almost by accident when, having returned home a little earlier from work, I saw a car slow down at our house, and Jenny got into it in the passenger seat. I parked a couple of doors down and leaned out to get a better look, and I recognized the hero of those very photographs. Without hesitation, I sharply turned the steering wheel and blocked their path, pressing the horn. Patrick swore and looked out the window. Hey, what the hell? And in the car next to him, my wife was sitting, her face white as a sheet. I got out and went to the driver's window. My heart was pounding, as if it was beating in my ears. Hi, I muttered, staring straight at him. You seem to be lost, buddy. He frowned and glanced at Jenny. What kind of jokes? This is not a joke, I said, looking into his eyes. I think we have something to talk about. Maybe you'll come out? Jenny jumped out of the car, trying to move between us. She grabbed my hand. Mark, please don't do this. This is not what you think. I smiled bitterly. Of course not. You just decided to go on business together, right? Patrick had realized by that time that I was Jenny's husband. He opened the door and went out, but did not become particularly bullish. I tried to speak in a low voice. Listen, buddy, let's avoid scandals. Your wife and I will leave now and calmly. I didn't let him finish. Gritting his teeth, he grabbed him sharply by the collar. I don't remember the last time I felt so out of control. I wanted to punch him in the face, but I restrained myself thanks to my inner voice. Don't get into a fight if you don't want problems with the police. I just muttered through my teeth. Disappear, and don't you dare show up again. Otherwise, you will regret it. Patrick clearly had no desire to get involved in a street brawl, especially on foreign territory. He pulled himself free, shrugged his shoulders disdainfully, got back into the car, and, casting a short glance at Jenny, said quietly, "Deal with your husband yourself." And he left. I stood in the middle of the street, feeling random passers-by staring at me. An elderly neighbor walked by and looked with a mixture of curiosity and condemnation, as if I was the criminal and not my wife. Everything was boiling inside me. I walked towards the house without even turning around. Jenny ran after me, muttering something like, "Let me explain, please." We went into the living room, and I slammed the door so hard that the glass rattled. I immediately asked, "How long has this been going on? How long have you been sleeping with this bastard?" My voice trembled, but not from weakness, but from rage mixed with treacherous pain. She pursed her lips, as if trying to hold back words that she shouldn't have had at all. Tears sparkled in her eyes. "Mark," she whispered, "please." I just laughed, evilly, dryly, almost hysterically. "Please? Are you serious? What do you want me to do? Understood. Forgiven." She swallowed, closed her eyes, and exhaled. "I'm confused. I didn't mean. I never wanted to hurt you." I stepped closer, feeling something dark and destructive boiling inside. "Didn't mean to cause pain," I grinned evilly. "Did you just want to have a nice time on the side? Were you bored? What were you missing, huh? Love? Care? Respect? I married you when you already had a child. I gave you everything. All." She sobbed, pressing her hand to her mouth. "It was a mistake." Her voice broke. I really didn't want it to go this far. But it's gone. At some point." She shook her head, avoiding my gaze. "I was lonely." "Are you lonely?" Something broke in me. "Were you alone, married to a man who worked his ass off so that you and Logan wouldn't want for anything? Who loved you enough to accept your son as his own? Do you realize what you are saying now?" She covered her face with her hands. I don't know. I can't explain." I stepped back as if struck. "Oh, as much as you can. It's always the same story, right? I didn't want to, but..." I clenched my fists. Only at the end of this story, there is always one person left who was smeared on the asphalt. The one who was betrayed. She burst into tears, covering her face with her hands. And if I had been softer, maybe I would have succumbed to pity. But my path to this exposure was too long and painful, so I strained. "Pack your things." She looked up at me pleadingly. "Where?" "We have a house. Logan. Logan will stay here with me. Or he will leave with you, decide for yourself." I no longer understood what I was saying in the heat of the moment. But I'm not going to put up with your deception any longer. You can go to him or anywhere. At that moment, I saw her sobbing, looking at the framed family photo where the three of us were smiling. I felt sick. I realized that now I was ruining not only her life, but also Logan's. Yes, maybe she is guilty, but what is the boy guilty of? However, the rage prevailed. I went into the kitchen, poured myself some whiskey, and drank it in one gulp. Jenny's quiet sobs could be heard from the living room. Apparently, she realized that everything would no longer be the same. The evening I exposed Jenny and told her to get lost ended in complete emotional disaster. As soon as I left the kitchen, I saw she was sitting on the floor in the living room, covering her face with her hands. Shoulders tremble, muffled sobs are heard. I, I didn't want it to be like this, she whispered, hearing my steps. Please, Mark, give me a chance to explain everything. But I no longer needed her version. The facts were on the table: correspondence, photographs. I went into the bedroom and, in a fit of rage, I collected an armful of her clothes from the closet and threw everything into the suitcase, at least some of her things. Yes, it seemed cruel, but I couldn't pull myself together. Go to your Patrick, I squeezed out, or wherever you want. But don't expect me to understand. What about Logan? She sobbed. He's staying with a friend for the night. What are you going to tell him? The boy's name hit me hard in the heart. Hell, I considered myself his father for almost 2 years. And now, faced with the betrayal of his mother, I cannot look at him without pain. But he is not to blame for anything. I don't know, I sighed. But I definitely don't want him to see you in this state. Yes, me too. It's better for him to stay with a friend now until we figure out what to do. Jenny didn't leave that night. She cried and begged me not to kick her out because Logan might be scared of change. I, cursing everything in the world, could not force her to sleep on the street. Yes, I was beside myself with rage, but apparently the remnants of humanity did not allow me to throw her out into the night to the mercy of fate. And the house was registered both in my name and in hers, though in the mortgage. From a legal point of view, I couldn't just throw her out, even if I thought it was morally fair. We decided that there would be a truce until the morning. I went to spend the night in the guest room, and she stayed in our marital bedroom. I hardly slept that night. I sat, looked at the ceiling, and wondered when that momentary release would come in which I could exhale. But no relief came. The next day, by lunchtime, Logan returned home from an overnight stay with a friend. The boy ran into the house, waving some kind of Star Wars toy figure, and shouted joyfully, "Dad, look what they gave me." I felt a pang in my heart when he called me Dad. Yes, technically I am not his father, but over the years we have both become accustomed to such treatment, and I never protested. Jenny immediately ran out of the kitchen, hugged her son, trying to smile and speak in a cheerful voice, as if nothing had happened. "How are you doing?" Logan asked. "I missed you." I coughed, not knowing what to say, and Jenny was the first to be found. We're okay, honey. It's just that Dad and I had a little work to do. Everything is fine." I felt disgusted by her words. She was lying right to the child's eyes, hiding that the family was on the verge of collapse. But I couldn't reproach her in front of Logan. Why traumatize the boy? I could only remain silent. The whole day was tense. Logan walked around the house, telling something he wanted to share his impressions, but a gloomy silence emanated from us. The son kept throwing anxious glances. Apparently, he felt that there was a smell of thunder between his parents. "Maybe we can play a board game," he suggested when he saw me in the living room. "To Monopoly." I wanted to say yes, but Jenny came out of the bedroom, pale and distracted. "Logan, Dad has no time now." "Me too. Sorry, Cat." His son's face immediately darkened, his shoulders slumped slightly. "Okay," he said quietly. "I'll go to my room then." I watched him as he disappeared through the door, and everything inside was clenched with rage, pain, and awareness. We were ruining him. Both of us. We ourselves are destroying his psyche, you know, I muttered, looking Jenny in the eyes. It would be better if you explained everything to him yourself. Her gaze flashed, not from remorse, but from protection. Explained what? She said sharply. That I'm a bad mom because I cheated, or that you want to kick me out of the house. This will simply kill him mentally. I clenched my teeth so hard that my jaw was cramping. How do you imagine your future life under one roof? Will you lie to him every day, pretending that nothing happened? She turned away, pressing her palms to her face. I saw how her shoulders trembled, how she swallowed the lump in her throat, but I no longer had the strength to sympathize or regret. I'm tired. All that remained was silent bitterness and the realization that everything we had built was now in ruins. Of course, after the open confrontation, I immediately called Harry, my lawyer friend, and asked for advice on how to legally get out of this situation. I told him, "She admitted to cheating. I have a lot of evidence. I want to file for divorce as soon as possible." Harry advised him not to rush. In our state of Massachusetts, the fact of infidelity does not always give the right to a hasty divorce on the most favorable terms. We need to think through a strategy. If you have a common child, even a stepchild, everything is more complicated. Plus, the house is under a mortgage, property issues will have to be resolved. But Logan is not my biological son, I replied. I didn't officially adopt him. So, technically, you are his stepfather, not his father, Harry explained. It can work for you or against you, depending on what you want. If you want to claim custody, prove that you are better at parenting. But Logan's biological father disappeared, and Jenny. Jenny was a single mother, I confirmed. I can't leave the guy. It's not his fault. Harry sighed. In such cases, the courts usually side with the biological parent, unless there are extreme circumstances, dependence, violence, serious violations of the law. Cheating alone is not enough to take a child away from its mother. But if you want him to stay with you, you will have to fight for it in court, prove an emotional connection, your financial stability, and so on. Be prepared that it will take nerves, money, and time. I understood. The path to divorce results in a long lawsuit, and I had two feelings. Part of me wanted to push Jenny legally to get the maximum for myself. Another part was painfully aware that this would affect Logan, and the house, bought for two people, would have to be divided somehow, and I was not going to leave her a cozy nest, which, in fact, I was equipping mainly at my own expense. In my heart, I was hatching an idea for a more cunning approach, to undermine Jenny's reputation in front of her work, in front of her acquaintances, so that she would be left without support. Let her feel what it's like to be vulnerable and humiliated, whispered the offended half of my soul. Yes, I was beginning to plunge into a dark area, ruining my wife's life the same way she broke my faith. But the thought of Logan stopped me, and also the understanding that I myself am not used to dirty methods. However, I found my resolve not to show leniency. She received enough indulgences from me. If there is a divorce, it will be on my terms. The second night after the confrontation, we sat at the kitchen table after Logan went to bed. Both were exhausted, hardly spoke all day, exchanging only everyday phrases, but it was necessary to dot the I's. So, my voice sounded dry, almost lifeless. What's next? Are we getting divorced? Jenny looked away, clasping her fingers so tightly that her knuckles turned white. I don't know. Her voice trembled, but it didn't bother me anymore. I understand that I am guilty. But Mark, I really don't want to lose our family. I love you no matter what. I exhaled sharply, feeling how everything inside was compressed into a tight, painful knot. Do you love it? I grinned, but there was nothing funny in this laugh. You cheated on me while I worked day and night so that we could have a home so that Logan would not need for anything. I married you when you already had a child. I accepted him as mine. And you? Did you just decide that you don't have enough warmth? She closed her eyes as if from a blow, and I noticed how her lips trembled. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to make excuses, she whispered. I really did something stupid. But I want to fix everything. For the first time in all this time, she tried to explain, to open up. She said that she felt like a burden When I was absent from work, she struggled with feelings of worthlessness and was afraid that she didn't live up to the image of an ideal wife. She was torn from the inside. On the one hand, she thanked me for everything I did for her. On the other, it seemed to her that she was unworthy of all this. And then Patrick appeared, the one who noticed her talent, who listened to her, who gave her what she so craved. Listening to all this, I felt only a dull, caustic pain. "So he gave you exactly what you thought I couldn't?" I asked, looking her straight in the eyes. She gasped, exhaled convulsively, but did not answer. "I understand," I continued coldly. "It's easy to understand. But accept? Never." She wanted to say something, but I was no longer listening. In the end, change is always a choice. No one forced her to go to bed with someone else. "What exactly do you want?" My voice sounded cold, distant, but rage, mixed with pain, was bubbling inside me, so that I ask for forgiveness for my busyness and pretend that there was no betrayal, so that I can continue to live with you as if everything's the same. Her lips trembled. There were tears in her eyes. She swallowed as if the words were stuck in her throat. "No," she exhaled, and her voice broke. I'm ready to break up with Patrick. I've already finished everything. It's over, I swear. I only care about you and Logan." I squinted, watching her face, every gesture, every movement. Is this true? Or is she just afraid of the consequences? Afraid that I won't forgive? Afraid that he will lose everything? "Okay," I said after a long, pressing pause. "Let's say you want to save your family. How are you going to win back my trust?" She sobbed, clutching the sleeves of her sweater with her fingers as if searching for support in them. "I will do whatever you say," she whispered, swallowing back tears. "I can make an appointment with a psychologist. I can live separately if you want. But I beg you, don't take hasty steps. Let's at least try. For our son's sake. For my son's sake." These words hit exactly where it hurt the most, to the weakest point. I didn't want to ruin Logan's life. He is not to blame for anything. But I also didn't want to live with a woman who betrayed me, who had fun behind my back. I looked at her face, crumpled with tears, at her disheveled hair, at her trembling lips. A pitiful sight. She was broken, but not from remorse, from fear, from the realization that now everything depends on me. If I file for divorce right now, then everything will spiral. Lawyers, division of property, court proceedings, custody issues, endless interrogations from Logan about why mom and dad are no longer together. I was ready for this, but I took a deep breath and exhaled. "Let me think," I finally managed. "But remember one thing, I no longer believe your words." She nodded without raising her head, and tears fell onto her hands. "Your forgiveness will cost dearly," I added harshly. She sobbed, and I saw something shrink in her as she accepted these conditions. And for the first time in all this time, I felt power. Now I'm not the one chasing her love. Now she is the one who begs me not to leave. And something inside me was coldly happy about this. Yes, maybe I'm turning into a scoundrel. But damn it, I don't care anymore. The next morning, I woke up with a clear decision. I wasn't going to rush into a divorce, but I wasn't going to pretend like nothing had happened. I won't forget. I won't forgive you just like that. The bed next to me was empty. We were already sleeping in different rooms. She was already up, probably trying to act normal. Only now, ordinary no longer existed. Everything has changed. I exhaled slowly, feeling a new, cold determination grow within me. Yesterday's emotions were replaced by something else. By awareness, I had trump cards in my hands that I could play at any second. Photos, videos, correspondence. Evidence of her betrayal, ready to become known to the public, the court, family, friends. I could use them so that she would experience firsthand what it was like to be deceived, humiliated, and without control over the situation. And I was going to do it. At lunchtime, I called our bank, where we took out a mortgage. In a calm voice, as if we were talking about simple financial advice, I asked if I could re-sign the contract exclusively for myself so that I could have complete control over the house. The specialist said that theoretically this is possible, but the consent of the second borrower, that is, Jenny, and financial verification will be required. I narrowed my eyes. Here it is. First step. If she voluntarily gives up her share in the house, then during a divorce it will be much more difficult for her to claim part of the property. I didn't tell her anything yet, I just kept this plan in my mind, thinking through exactly how to implement it. Then I went to the accountant at our family's insurance company and asked one more question. Can I exclude my wife from my health coverage? It turned out that yes, if you change your insurance status from family to individual. I nodded, making a mental note. Another lever of pressure. I didn't remove the spyware from her smartphone. On the contrary, now I monitored every message, every call. Not because I was jealous. I felt nothing but icy contempt for her. I just wanted to understand what she was doing, what she was thinking about, whether she was building new intrigues, whether she had renewed her connection with Patrick. Is he preparing some kind of revenge for me? The paranoid part of my mind grew, but I thought it was justified. And now, a couple of days later, I caught myself on a new wave of malicious satisfaction. Jenny broke up with Patrick via text message. It's over. I can't do this anymore. I need to save my family. I have read this message several times. Then he looked at Patrick's answer. Anger, disappointment, prayers. He tried to convince her to meet, pressed, persuaded. And she, for the first time ever, was firm. Don't come near my house. This could complicate things. Don't write to me anymore. I smiled bitterly as I looked at the screen. Well, at least she made the right choice here. I looked out the window at the evening sky, painted in crimson-violet shades. Somewhere below, Logan was playing with a ball, not even suspecting what Shakespearean passions were boiling in his house. The world kept moving. What about me? I was no longer the same person who once trusted my wife unconditionally. Under Logan, we tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy. We sat at the same table, discussed his lessons, watched family films, pretending that everything was the same as before. But I saw how he looked at me with anxiety, how he caught the moments when I was not next to my mother, when an icy silence hung between us. He felt that something was broken, even if he couldn't fully understand it. Sometimes he carefully asked, "Dad, why are you sleeping in another room now? Are you sick?" I swallowed, trying to hide my irritation, and answered as calmly as possible. "Yes, son, just temporary." He nodded, but I saw distrust in his eyes. He was smarter than we thought. Jenny tried to be a good wife, or at least that's what she wanted to look like. She cooked dinners that smelled just like the old days when I came home from work, and she greeted me with a smile. She cleaned, washed my clothes, as if this could erase her betrayal. Sometimes she would sit next to me while I was watching TV, as if hoping that I would let her be a part of my life again. But I didn't pay attention. I flipped through the channels, pretending that her presence meant nothing to me. Sometimes she sat opposite, her eyes filled with quiet prayer, as if they were saying without words, "Please forgive me." But I just turned away. We only talked about Logan. "Maybe we should transfer him to another school," she asked carefully. "We were thinking of moving closer to your office, remember?" "We don't think anything anymore," I answered coldly. "I will decide for myself what will be better." She pursed her lips, hiding her tears. Sometimes, at the most unexpected moments, I caught myself with a terrible thought. I still want her. Her body, her smell, her voice, everything that was mine for so many years has now become forbidden, alien. But nature did not know morality. At night, lying alone, I remembered our nights, her breath, her skin, and every time the desire enveloped me, I hated myself for it. How can I desire a cheater? I clenched my teeth, trying to erase these thoughts from my head. But human nature is a stubborn bitch. One night, I heard a soft knock on the door. Mark. I knew it was her. I hesitated before answering. "What do you want?" The door opened slightly, and in the faint light of the corridor, I saw her silhouette. She was wearing one of my old t-shirts, the one I always liked to wear to bed. "I can't sleep." Her voice was quiet, trembling. "I'm scared. I heard some noise near the house." I sighed. "It's just the wind." please." Her fingers nervously squeezed the hem of her t-shirt. "Can I stay with you? I'm scared alone in the dark." I didn't answer, but still he got up and checked the windows and doors. Everything was locked. Everything was calm. She was just looking for a reason. When I returned to the room, she was still standing at the door, not daring to enter. "Can I?" she repeated, barely audible. I sat on the bed, looking at her in the darkness. She carefully took a step forward, then another one. Then she sat down next to me, so close that I could feel the warmth of her body. Silence filled the room. I heard her breathing. She slowly raised her hand and timidly touched my palm. And then the whole past flashed before my eyes, all those nights when this gesture was simple, natural, when her touch brought me joy, comfort, desire. Now they only brought pain. I abruptly pulled my hand away. "Go to your place. This won't help anymore." She flinched as if I had hit her. The lips trembled, but no words came. And then I heard her sob quietly. She left, and a minute later there was the soft sound of the bedroom door closing, and I was left sitting in the dark. Soon there was another turn. One day, an unfamiliar woman called me and introduced herself as Sarah Sterling, wife of Patrick Sterling. It turned out that she miraculously found my number through common connections on social networks. My wife, Jenny, once left a mention that she works with Sterling Partners. "Mark, I found something important. This concerns Patrick. You should see this." "What are you talking about?" He became wary. "I have a video. Records of his infidelities, documents about financial fraud. He is not just a traitor, he is a pathological manipulator. You are not the first one from whom he stole his wife. This is his game. I want to destroy him. Are you with me?" Mark fell silent, comprehending what he had heard. He had known for a long time that Patrick had destroyed his marriage, but now it turned out that this was not the first time. Sarah continued, "I've been watching him for the past months. I have proof. If we join forces, he will lose everything. His job, his money, his reputation. All we need is your consent." Mark thought about it. The same pain that had tormented him all these months flared up in him again. He had nothing to lose but to avenge everything. "I'm in. Let's meet and discuss the details." The next day they met in Sarah's office. She laid out a folder with documents, a flash drive with videos, and a phone with correspondence in front of him. All this was irrefutable evidence that Patrick is a serial traitor and fraudster. Here are the records of payments. He used the company to pay for his love affairs, paid for hotels, expensive gifts. And this? Mark picked up the flash drive. Video. He recorded his infidelities. "And your wife is there too." Mark clenched his fists, but quickly pulled himself together. "What are you suggesting?" "We will hand over everything to the press, his superiors, and the tax authorities. He won't just lose his job, he'll go to court. We just need to do it correctly." Mark grinned. "Then let's get on with it. He will pay for everything." "Explain just one thing. Why did you put up with this for so many years?" "For the sake of the children, I was afraid that he would do this to take them away, but now I have everything to say goodbye to him." Over the course of several weeks, they methodically destroyed Patrick's life. The documents were handed over to the tax office. The video fell into the hands of journalists. But not all of the videos in which Mark's wife was lost were lost. His reputation was destroyed. Colleagues, investors, and friends turned their backs on him. The business was under investigation, and Patrick himself was under threat of arrest. Mark watched this with cold satisfaction. He achieved justice. Now there was only one last thing left. In the evening, he invited Jenny into the living room. There were divorce papers on the table. "I'm filing for divorce. You sign the papers and fulfill my conditions, or everything will become public knowledge. You will not find a job. You will be considered an accomplice to the fraud. Your choice." She turned pale. "What do you want?" "The house and property remain with me. Joint custody of Logan. I will continue to provide for him, help him, and participate in life. But there is nothing more between us. No communication, no contacts. If you don't agree, I'll make everything public." She bit her lip. Tears appeared in her eyes, but she understood there was no way out. "I'll sign," she whispered, "but you really won't give me a second chance. You betrayed me. There are no second chances." She closed her eyes, nodding. Then she took a pen and signed the documents. The two of them sat down in front of Logan. "Son," Mark began, "we need to talk." Logan looked at them with concern. "We're getting a divorce," Jenny said, having difficulty pronouncing the words, "but you will stay with both of us. Father will be there, we both love you. But your family," the boy's voice trembled. "We are family, but in a different form. I will still be with you. I will help, support, pick you up on weekends and holidays." "You won't lose me," Mark assured him. Logan looked at him, then at his mother. In his eyes, there was a childish understanding that something serious was happening, that the world would no longer be the same. "Do you promise?" he whispered. Mark took his hand. "I promise." Logan threw his arms around his neck, and Mark squeezed him in his arms, knowing that no matter what, he would be there. 10 years have passed. Mark opened the email from Logan. The guy was already studying at the university, playing on the student baseball team. Having scanned the first lines, Mark involuntarily smiled. The boy had grown up. But in his words, one could still hear the same sincere gratitude as many years ago. Since he and Jenny divorced, Mark has not missed a single important event in Logan's life. He was there the first time was recruited to the junior team when he made his first winning play by kicking the ball out of bounds. He remembered how excited Logan was before the school championship, how he trained hard despite being tired, how he jumped for joy after scoring his first hat trick. When Logan turned 14, he faced his first serious defeat. His team lost in the finals, although he gave it his all. That evening, Mark took him to a diner where they ate burgers and were silent. "You will always win if you don't give up," Mark said then. Logan just nodded, but a week later he was training again with redoubled zeal. 15 years old. The first serious selection for the regional team. Mark sat in the stands holding his breath as Logan came out to serve. He hit 3 great shots that day and was accepted onto the team. After the game, Logan couldn't believe it, and Mark simply patted him on the shoulder. "You deserve it." 16. A turning point year. Logan began to think about the future. Many of his friends had given up the sport, but he couldn't imagine his life without baseball. Mark helped him choose colleges with strong sports programs. Together, they wrote up applications and analyzed the tactics of student team games. 17. Last school season. Logan led the team to the state finals and made the shot in the deciding game that gave them the win. It was one of those moments that you will remember for a lifetime. After the game, he proudly gave Mark the ball, the same one he hit on the winning putt. "Hi, Dad. I'm great. I'll come this weekend. Love you." Mark smiled at the message from Logan. He read it again, allowing himself to feel every word. After all, life turned out the way he wanted. Calm reigned in his spacious house, with panoramic windows and a cozy terrace. He achieved success in business. He had a new woman, mature, understanding, without drama and pretensions. He finished with Jenny completely, leaving her not a single chance to return to his life. He even bought Logan a personal phone so he could make appointments directly without having to confront his ex-wife. This stage has been passed. Sipping his morning coffee in a ceramic mug with the Starbucks logo, Mark glanced out the window. Neighbor John was already pulling trash cans to the curb in preparation for his weekly trash pickup. A yellow school bus drove slowly down the street, collecting children for school. Everything went as usual. But for Patrick, life turned out differently. He never recovered from the crash. Once a successful businessman, he was now hiding in another state, fleeing creditors and angry clients. His company collapsed, leaving behind a long trail of unpaid bills and lawsuits. Sarah, she didn't pull him along with her. She moved on, meeting a man with whom she seemed to be happy. Ironically, Mark didn't feel an ounce of regret. Everything that was planned has come true. Old grievances have been avenged. And most importantly, life went on. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.